The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hi, I'm Barbara Richer. Welcome to An Open Door on the Arts. It's our great pleasure to travel throughout the Capital Region and beyond sometimes and visit the amazing artists that enrich our lives here. We're so fortunate to be in such a very art-prone community, especially in the summer. And today, we aren't going very far at all. Today, we are coming right back into the Capital Region, and we're meeting with Owen Smith of the Park Playhouse. Now, I'm sure that some of you out there remember the Park Playhouse and have been going there for 27 years in the summer. And I remember it from even longer ago than 27 years. That boathouse elicits romance and adventure and always something good that can happen. And Park Playhouse has been there making good things happen for quite a long time. So I am very happy to meet you, Owen Smith, and welcome to our program.
It's my pleasure to be here, thanks.
Since we've all come to know and love the Park Playhouse for so many years, I'm wondering if you can just step back in time a little and give us some of the really important history about that magical place.
Sure. Well, it was founded in 1989, and it really is a magical place. And it was founded on the idea of the arts in this community being for everyone. Mm-hmm. It was founded on the idea that we will develop a better place to live, a better place to work if we can engage more of our local population in the arts. And really to do that, the idea was that live theatrical productions would be done in this beautiful outdoor setting for free.
Make it available.
That's right. Yeah, make it available. Make it so that in that crowd of sometimes over 2,000 people on a nice busy night in the summer, you get people from all walks of life. Mm-hmm. You get people who have been exposed to theater regularly and who are fans of the genre, and you get people who are underexposed or not exposed at all.
Brand new.
Brand new. And that's the coolest thing to me is still today, 27 years later, the people that come up who, A, say they've never been to a show before, never been to a play, or B, specifically for Park Playhouse, never knew it existed. How 27 years later we have this unique thing running in the Capital District and people don't know it exists is amazing to me.
It is amazing.
But I get beyond myself because you asked about the history, and it was founded really by Mayor Whalen of the city of Albany in conjunction with Mimi Scott and her husband Barry, mm-hmm. Along with the Swire family. And I could go on and on and on about the people that were behind this, but really it was a great example of a community in conjunction with its local government coming together to create something special and something unique.
It doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't.
When it does, you can hope for magic.
Yeah, and the fact that it's lasted for as long as it has is a testament to what a good idea it was. And in those early days, the company produced 2 musicals, one in July and one in August, very short runs, mostly on the weekends, and did so on a stage that was built just like it is today in front of basically in the parking lot in front of the lake house. Mm-hmm. And we're fortunate that the lake house has this beautiful band shell built into it, so yes. You can put a live orchestra up there, a live musical theater pit, I should say, and the amplification is beautiful. There's something very natural about it. But back in those days, it was just a hill. And after about 2 years, in 1991, Mayor Whalen and Mimi Scott put together a campaign to expand that hill, or rather build into it, I should say, a stepped amphitheater to make mm-hmm. the seating much more comfortable. People were sitting on their chairs, sort of falling forward.
They were, and blankets kind of
rolling
right. down the hill.
That's right. That. Oh, and you know, for folks to get up to the top of the hill on a packed night, for some people without a set of stairs, that was not possible. And again, for something to be all about access, you want it to be accessible. Mm-hmm. And so they raised a significant sum of money that year in 1991 to build an amphitheater. And the organization was attracting pretty significant audiences and doing, you know, if not Broadway quality musicals, certainly Broadway scale musicals. And that was the sort of the tagline back in the day was, this is Albany's Broadway Broadway in Albany's backyard. And that's really cool.
That's good.
And to be able to, I think now even I try to say to our sponsors and people who are behind us that we try to give people a lot more than they're not paying for. And I think from those early days on, people were getting a lot more than they weren't paying for. So that was sort of the early days. Mimi Scott moved on to seek out other opportunities, and her life took her down south to Florida. The gentleman who had been the original artistic director, Ven Borromeo, stayed on and was the producing artistic director. The company continued to produce sort of classic Broadway musicals. And in 1995 was the next sort of big change, and that was that year, Mayor Jerry Jennings approached Park Playhouse about getting something together for young people in Albany. And that was the founding of Park Playhouse 2. Park Playhouse 2 is a program that is geared towards students between the ages of 13 and 18 to take them sort of beyond the theatrical productions that maybe they were doing in their schools or in local community theaters, and really give them a summer-long, a camp experience essentially, but really something that we think of as a theater intensive. They live, work, and breathe theater 8 hours a day for the whole summer.
I think that's so exciting, and I think that's also something that the general public is not as aware of as they might be. There are so many arts organizations like the Park Playhouse that also have this arm that reaches into the community and supports the hopes and dreams of the children, of the youngsters, of the young teens, as a part of enriching their program. The Albany Symphony does it, Pro Musica does it, a number of people do it, Cap Rep does it. But I don't think that a lot of people are aware that Park Playhouse also is able to do that along with these productions being free. That's pretty
probably
amazing.
True. I think as I go out there and tell our story to potential sponsors and to donors and try to build the resources that we need to do our seasons every year, that's something I'm finding to be true, is that people really don't know the scope of what we do. They've sort of pigeonholed us as just these free theater productions in the summer. Then there's more to it, and more to come, certainly as we go through the history, because that program proved very, very popular. We were getting, upwards of 100 kids trying out every summer. And actually, for me, this is where my part in the story starts to come into play. When I was 14 years old, I grew up around here. I lived in and around the capital region my whole life, and I auditioned for Park Playhouse 2 and was lucky enough to be a student performer.
So you're an alumni, come back.
I am. I'm a graduate, as we call them. Yeah, absolutely. A local kid who was in local theater. Yeah, coming back and hopefully making good. And I met a lot of my best friends doing youth theater at Park Playhouse. I met the woman who's now my wife Julie, through Park Playhouse 2. So it's a very special place to me, and that's sort of when I became a part of the program. But as we went into the next decade, into the 2000s, we had a partnership with the City School District of Albany that began. We started to have more of a year-round presence as an arts educator. But like a lot of arts organizations, tough times sort of hit at the end of the last decade with the economic downturn. Park Playhouse had been under the same leadership for a long time, and essentially it was time for a change. It was time to sort of shake things up, to try to address some of the challenges and really commit ourselves to artistic quality and commit ourselves to some growth, commit ourselves to stretching our legs beyond where they had already been. And I was lucky enough in the end of 2009, to get contacted by some folks on the board to talk about potentially coming up. I was living briefly, I lived in New York City for a few years at the end of the last decade and was doing theater down there, directing shows and producing some shows. And I was lucky enough to get this call to come up and talk about whether I would be interested in coming home. And I was. This is such a special program to me that it was a no-brainer to come back to town and work on seeing what we could do with it. And so we really, through not my work, but the work of me and a whole team on the staff, and also a really awesome group of people on the board who believe in this program and who think it
could see the future.
Yeah. They think it can be more than it is. We've been able to grow it into more than it is. So the last 6 years of our history have really been exciting. We've gone back to a model where we do 2 major productions in the park with fully realized sets and costumes and everything, one in July, one in August. We've also significantly increased our footprint as an arts educator. Now, not only do we have Park Playhouse 2 for teenage students during the summer months, but we also have Park Playhouse Kids for 8 to 12-year-olds. So we're serving a younger population, a very similar program, a summer theater intensive, but with exercises that are geared towards beginners in the arts. And then a year-round series of programs, one where we teach, we call it the Park Playhouse Workshop. We teach classes in dance styles from tap to ballet to jazz. We do a performing artist workshop where...
Now, where do those things take place?
Well, we've been lucky enough to partner with IBA on Hudson at Lark Street, and that's been wonderful. They have a wonderful studio there, and Maud Baum is a great partner to us in hosting those programs, and we get some of her students involved as well. But then we also have a Park Playhouse Touring Academy where we bring professionally produced musicals into elementary schools and some middle schools throughout the region, not just the City School District of Albany, but throughout the greater region.
You have grown by leaps and bounds.
It feels that way. It feels like we've come a long way just in that arts education area, and that makes some business sense too, because I find that people in this area have a ton of options for where to put their charitable dollars, and in the arts, we're up against not only other arts organizations who are fighting for dollars, but also charities related to people's health, charities related to social justice, charities related to social wellness. I mean, there's so much there's so much need out there. And so to be able to tell the story of how we're affecting young people is not only just a good thing because it's good for young people in the community, but it's a good thing as a business to be able to say, hey, here's what we're doing. We need support to do it. So we've been able to grow our corporate sponsorship. We've been able to grow our foundation grant making. We've been able to grow our individual giving. And that's especially important because through this last 6 years of history, one sort of blip on the radar that is unfortunate, but it is what it is that in 2011, in my second year here, it's well known that during that year, the City of Albany ended its City Arts Grant program for major arts organizations.
The grant was finished.
It went away. And for Park Playhouse, that accounted for about $55,000. It's a significant sum of money. Now, that's pretty similar to the amounts of money that was lost by some of the other larger arts organizations like the Symphony or the Palace or Cap Rapid. But for Park Playhouse, it accounted for a much bigger percentage of our what is a reasonably small operating budget as compared to some of the other organizations.
That demanded a very big scramble, didn't it?
It did. It absolutely did. I mean, we had to, number one, look at our model in the summer and figure out how can we make more money off what we're doing. And that's where the idea of going to 2 shows, one in July, one in August, came from. In my first year on board, we started to track some metrics in terms of average nightly attendance, average, in-park revenue per attendee. I mean, we don't charge for all of those seats, but we pass the hat at intermission. We, have raffles, we have concessions. We do things to try to offset the fact that our costs are free.
You really need to keep building an audience.
No doubt about it. And there are costs associated with doing these shows. Some of them, you build a set once, but if you're going to do a show for 10 weeks instead of 5 weeks, you're going to pay more in salaries, you're going to pay more for the royalties to the author of the play. My gamble was that, during those first few weeks of Park Playhouse in July, you might have 300 or 400 or 500 people in the audience, which at some theaters is great. But in a giant amphitheater like we have, it feels like a pittance. It feels like this small crowd. We seat... It's hard to say because we say that we can comfortably seat 2,000.
Okay.
The reason I say it's hard to say is because there are nights towards the end of the run of each of the shows we do each summer where there will be people seated way, way, way off on these side hills on the side of the amphitheater, and they'll be there with their kids. Their kids are running around. They're hardly watching the show because they can't see the show. They're so far away, but they can hear it, and it's a community outing. It's something you can go for free, sit out with a lot of other folks, get an ice cream, listen to good music. I mean, comfortably we can seat 2,000, but there are nights where we push well beyond that.
Amazing.
But
I'm just gonna back up for a second. You did mention something, and I think it's a good opportunity to, because I never gave anybody your actual business title, and I want to be able to do that. But you mentioned partnerships, which I think all of the arts organizations in our area are very keen on promoting and being involved in, and you're with IBA, but there's and that can do nothing but enrich all agencies involved in those partnerships. And recently, you've also undertaken a very large partnership. And you have become not only the artistic director and production director with Park Playhouse, but also the managing director at the Palace Theater, which is a very interesting and I think probably important partnership for both the Palace and the Park Playhouse.
Absolutely. It's serving a need for both organizations. For Park Playhouse, that need was essential to be served. So in losing that City Arts grant in 2011, looking at changing our production model at Park Playhouse and looking at some off-season programming and things like that to raise revenue, that wasn't going to get us past the finish line in terms of making up for that loss of municipal funding. Park Playhouse had always been a municipally funded organization, and it demanded significant action. And luckily, there were some board members at Park Playhouse and board members at the Palace and municipal government, the mayor at the time, who thought it would be a good idea to explore what was possible between Park Playhouse and the Palace. The Palace had gone through some changes at that time as well. The Palace had, at that point, hired a new executive director in Holly Brown, who continues to be the executive director today. And Holly was building a new team around the Palace and trying to change its fortunes in terms of the number of shows that are presented and in terms of its role as a leader in the arts community. The Palace had often been seen historically as a venue, as a building. And I don't think that there was an awareness on the community's part that there's a whole organization there that's working to bring arts and culture into the city and into the community. And so the sense was that there was some help needed there at the Palace in terms of management support. And on the Park Playhouse side of things, losing that city money, one of the things that I think made really difficult was funding a full-time administrator salary all throughout the year. It was hard to pay me a reasonable salary for a full-time arts administrator. And so in looking at the calendars of these two programs, Park Playhouse, despite any off-season programming we do, it's really at its busiest from June through August.
Right.
Whereas the Palace, despite showing a few shows here and there throughout the summer, is really at its busiest from September through May. And so the sense was, well, maybe there's enough synergy here just in terms of the calendar to share me. And so that was step one. I did become the managing director at the Palace.
Perfect.
And I was very proud of that and very, very happy to be associated with that organization. And it's become for me as much a part of my DNA as Park Playhouse is.
Excellent.
And I believe in the Palace. I think that the Palace holds, in my estimation, the keys to a lot of future development for the city of Albany and for the greater region. If you look at the growth at the Palace just over these last 3 years, I'm so proud of what Holly has done, what I've done, what the team has done.
That is an amazing story. And I'm going to interrupt you one more time because we've talked about doing history of the Palace Theater. I think that's something that we really ought to do.
Yeah.
And we've been talking to Holly, and I'm hoping maybe in the fall we can do maybe two or three part series of the history of the Palace. But I'm going to pull us back to the Park Playhouse because we have, as you say, about 3 or 4 months to make this magic happen and have it there before us and entertain at least 2,000 people a night off on the hillside. So summer, 27th summer, here we are.
Yes, indeed. And what we've, these last couple years, we've really tried to recommit ourselves to artistic excellence and really make sure those shows are, again, if not necessarily Broadway quality, we don't have a $10 million budget, at least Broadway scale and doing some interesting things and also have tried to really get creative in terms of the type of programming we do. So last season saw in July us stepping outside of the box a little bit and doing a newer musical called Hands on a Hard Body. And it was cool. It was a musical based on a movie, and a movie that very few people were really familiar with. And despite what I thought was excellent quality of the show, it was really cool, to have a full-scale pickup truck on stage and people spinning it around and doing all sorts of wild stuff with it and singing in a way that I think people hadn't been used to hearing people sing at Park Playhouse. We got great reviews. The audience response was wonderful. But we got rained out about half the time.
Oh, no.
And I got tired of people saying to me, you should do Singing in the Rain, like thinking that it was a funny joke. It's like, I don't want to joke right now. We're losing money here by not having a show. But at some point, our board chairman, Kathleen McNamee, said to me, we should do Singing in the Rain. And she wasn't kidding.
Yeah.
And I was in an interview with Steve Barnes of the Times-Union about how our summer was going, given the fact that there was so much rain last summer.
It was terrible last
I
summer.
said to him, I'm not joking. I'm thinking we're going to do Singing in the Rain last year. And of course he laughed. And I said, no, I'm not joking.
We're doing Singing in the Rain.
The truth is, it's a show. It's a musical based on a movie, not unlike Hands on a Hard Body. The difference is it's a movie that everyone's familiar with. What I have found as I've been talking about it is that people are familiar with it, but they're not intimately familiar with it. They know the classic scene with Gene Kelly dancing in the rain.
Yes.
Maybe they remember Donald O'Connor beating himself up and make them laugh. But, I don't know that people are as familiar with the movie as they are with the title. And so I'm very excited about it. That's our July production, Singing in the Rain. Our August production, which will feature some regional talent alongside our Park Playhouse 2 students, is the Pajama Game.
Oh,
and
fun.
It is fun. It's a show that, high schools do it from time to time. Community theaters maybe dabble with it, but it's really this classical musical that just doesn't get done very often. And so Benita Zahn's the vice president of our board, and she said the word for this season, and she's right, is vintage.
Yes,
they're
it
vintage
is.
classics. They don't get taken
Yes,
out of the they don't get taken out of the vault that often. And to me, that's a good reason to do them. It's a good reason to do them.
Well, let me just ask you this, because it is vintage, and they are very popular titles that, as you say, people know but don't know at the same time, and will come and be just blown away, I'm sure. Do you think that you said you did have, though, good response to doing something new, kind of out of the box. So will you go back to doing more just vintage, which is wonderful, or do you think Park Playhouse can venture into sort of new?
I appreciate the question because I've had a number of people ask me, people who were really excited by us doing something like Hands on a Hard Body.
Right.
Well, are you taking your foot off the gas in doing something like Singing in the Rain, which admittedly is certainly at least more well known than Hands on a Hard
Yes.
Body. My answer to that is that you don't have to be edgy to be cutting edge. I mean, it's Singing in the Rain. Doing something like that on stage presents a whole host of challenges that something like Hands on a Hard Body doesn't present. Dealing with audience expectations, dealing with the technical challenge of how do you make it rain and really look like a rain
Yes,
shower on stage,
yeah.
all the while hoping it doesn't actually rain. So I think that we're trying to remain on the cutting edge of theatrical production. But the truth is we have a really diverse audience. And there are people in that audience, as I alluded to earlier, who are extremely exposed to theater, people who are underexposed, people who aren't exposed at all. Some of those folks who are extremely exposed, coincidentally, are the people who want to see the classics. They
Yes.
think of Park Playhouse as a place where they can go, bring their kids, bring their grandkids, and see the Oklahomas, the My Fair Ladies.
Yes.
And I'm committed to that kind of material remaining a part of our repertoire. It's important. It's important that
is.
those people who have been behind Park Playhouse since day one get what they bargained for.
Right.
A lot of them are the supporters of our work, and I want to serve them with the kind of material that they're interested in. And there is a place, in my estimation, there's a reason why right now on Broadway, The King and I is running in a revival and selling packed out houses every night. There's a reason why Fiddler on the Roof is coming back to Broadway.
Yet again.
Yet again, with Danny Burstein as Tevye. I mean, there's a reason why these tried and true musicals and plays come back. It's because they have a good story to tell.
Yes.
And they have a meaningful story. And as long as you approach it in a vital way where you're finding what is timely about that story, then it's worth doing. Now, I'm committed to us being a theater that will always work to find what it is that's vital about the story, and we've done a lot of that with Singing in the Rain and the Pajama Game, but classics will remain a part of our repertoire, but I'm also committed to them not being the only part. Something like Hands on a Hard Body, audiences can absolutely expect that every couple of years we're going to throw a curveball in there, because you have to. You have to, because last summer, I mentioned earlier that every now and then someone will come up to me and be like, I had no idea this exists. even with the rainouts last year, that happened more than it had ever happened before in my experience. And that's because we did something that attracted a different audience.
Yes.
Hands on a Hard Body was written by Trey Anastasio from the band Fish. There were a lot of fans of his work,
I'm sure,
who came and saw it, who had never been exposed to a Broadway musical. I think that's a wonderful service for us to provide. So really, I think that with the resources that we've been building, with our partnership with the Palace sort of backing us up, I'd like to see Park Playhouse, as time goes on, become more and more of a theater festival. Not just a one-off, not just a two-off, but a theater festival, an organization that produces things, some for free, some for perhaps a low ticket price at another venue, some perhaps just in a staged reading style that are classic musicals, sort of maybe off-Broadway classics, smaller classics, and new work. And, you know, there is a hunger, in my estimation, in this region for arts and culture. And we have a population that I think, compared to a lot of cities our size, is very engaged in the arts and entertainment scene.
Right.
And so to me, that's a good justification to want to expand our programming and to want to try to diversify our programming. So this season, vintage classics. Next season, who knows?
Who knows? No, I think that's wonderful, and I think that it keeps your audiences growing. It keeps your audiences excited. As you were talking, I was imagining that somebody's out there writing a script right now for the growth of the Palace Theater or the growth of the Park Playhouse, and someday that will become a play.
You never know.
Right, how it grew from the beautiful Washington Park Boathouse and beyond. I'm so excited about all of this that you're sharing with us. I do know that you've already had some activities going on, and I missed one that I very much wanted to come to that was actually held at the Palace Theater, but it was a promotion for Singing in the Rain at Park Playhouse, and maybe you can tell us just a bit about what that was like to have.
I'm happy to. It was a wonderful night. It was a really cool night.
Now, our audience doesn't know what we're talking about,
so I'll lay it out.
You tell us.
Well, you know, with something as classic as Singing in the Rain, I think, you know, it's important that you start with those audience expectations. You want to make sure that the people who come to the theater, who are intimately aware of the movie and who remember specific moments, that you serve them as much as you're serving someone who's coming who's never seen the film. So we thought it would be cool to show the movie. And, you know, again, this partnership with the Palace, it's not just about administrative support. It's not just about production support. It's about giving us a venue in which to expand as an arts producer and as an arts organization. And so what we did was we put together an evening where we would show the movie,
Singing in the Rain.
Singing in the Rain, but the original Gene Kelly movie. But we were lucky enough to be sort of, and this was all just coincidence. Scott Sauer of WMHT contacted me because he was working in his pledge drive with Patricia Ward Kelly. Patricia Ward Kelly is the wife of the late Gene Kelly, and she has put together a one-woman show where she basically tells his story, and she tells it through a mix of personal anecdotes, letters that he wrote to her or that other people wrote to him, video clips, behind the scenes type of material, and she sort of gives her audience this intimate look at who was Gene Kelly. Not the Gene Kelly that we all know from American in Paris and Singing in the Rain, but the Gene Kelly who stood behind the camera and thought critically about how best to shoot dance for the film. And she really gets to the heart of what he wanted to be remembered for. So she's producing that show at the Egg in September, and I hope that people will give it a look because it's really sensational.
It sounds sensational.
She's a very interesting person. She's a wonderful, wonderful person and a real art supporter. And Scott basically brought her together with us and said, there's got to be something we can do here to sort of, you know, high tidal, raise all ships. How do we get this all together? So we said, well, we're thinking about showing the movie, and Patricia, would you like to come and be a part of that? And she said she would. She said she wanted to come and introduce the movie and also do a Q&A with the audience. So when we had this event at the Palace 2 weeks ago, before the movie, she came out and sort of set the stage for the audience. And then she spent a good 45 minutes after the movie answering questions, and there were a lot of questions. One of the coolest things about that night, though, going back to an earlier point, she asked for a show of hands immediately after the film ended, saying, how many of you was this your first time seeing Singing in the Rain? And you can't believe it, but well more than half the people in the audience raised their hand.
My gosh.
So, and now a lot of those people that raised their hand were younger people who were there with either a parent or a grandparent, but a lot of them were people my age, a lot of them were people your age. I mean, people who, again, had been familiar with the title, but who weren't intimately aware of the details of the movie. And the movie still, I sat there and watched every minute of it, and I was really keyed in on the audience's reactions to it.
They were with it.
50 some odd years later, it gets laughs. It's still there, absolutely with it. And Patricia shared some really cool stories about the secrets of the movie and some of the misconceptions and just interesting tidbits about Gene Kelly's role in bringing that film to life. And it was a cool way to start our season, because for us the challenge is, how do you both play to the movie and play against the movie?
Yes.
We have to create something that's uniquely theatrical. And I had dinner with Patricia following the showing, and we had a great conversation about how she's seen a lot of stage presentations of it that haven't gone well.
Right.
And in fact, the original Broadway production back in the 80s didn't get very good reviews. And really the reason for that is that productions often will try to recreate the movie. That's hard to do.
Can't do that.
Can't do it.
No.
I mean, you think about some of the scenes, the song Good Morning that people are so familiar with. They tap dance from one room to another room to another room, and the camera just pans with them the whole time. You can't do that on a stage. And to try to do it is, I think,
You're
ill-advised.
in trouble if you try it.
Yeah.
You're in trouble.
So our creative team has to really come up with, number one, on a practical level, how do you stage something like this and find enough of those classic moments that the audience feels satisfied if they know the film, but also do it in such a way that it is uniquely yours, so that people that are approaching it for the first time aren't watching something that's produced like they've bitten off too much that they can't chew it. And so for us, we start with the question of, well, what is it about this story that's important? What is it about this story that speaks to the modern age? And Singin' in the Rain is a love story, certainly, and obviously that's timeless. But it's also it's a movie about the movies, and it's a movie about a new technology creeping in and threatening and in fact killing an old technology or an old art form. It's about the silent films being killed by the talkies.
By talkies.
And while that may be 80 years, 90 years in the record books, the truth is that we're living in a world right now where
one technology after another
That's right.
is just bombarding
That's
the previous.
absolutely right. And the director of the show, who's a longtime colleague of Park Playhouse, he and I had a great talk, one of our very first sort of conceptual conversations about the musical, about the idea that the theater in and of itself is threatened by technology every day. We are all walking around these days with devices in our pockets where you can have a Netflix app and you can pull up just about any movie you can think of. For like $8 a month, you can have unlimited access to this huge catalog of film and television, and that's great.
But you lose that intimate specialness of really communicating face to face with each other.
Well, it's a different
and you
art
forget how to talk, which is interesting. It's sort of the opposite of what's happening with the talkies going out. Now we're becoming silent.
That's a very interesting way to look at it. It's a very interesting way to look at it.
I have to hurry us along, and I don't want to, because I could continue talking forever about these things. I do want to be sure, though, that we've covered some of the very basic things. You have 3 shows in your season.
That's right. Yeah, we haven't talked about the
July,
third.
And the third one is
Cinderella. Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, and it's a version that is specifically crafted to be performed by young performers. So I mentioned that our Park Playhouse 2 students would be featured in the Pajama Game, which will play in August in the park. And again, it's one of those musicals, if folks haven't heard of it, I hope that they come out and give it a try, because the score is awesome. It's really funny, it's really endearing, and it's a story about people fighting for their rights, fighting for a raise. Now, it's set in the 1950s. They're fighting for a 7.5-cent raise.
It's pretty relevant today, too,
yes,
isn't it?
It is.
Very relevant
Come
today.
on. I mean, look at the number of people that are out there now fighting for wage increases and wage equality. So there is some resonance there, too. But our Park Playhouse kids students, our 8 to 12-year-olds, are going to perform Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. which is, again, a vintage classic. Some really classic tunes in there. And it's, interestingly, not dissimilar to Singing in the Rain, which was started as a movie. Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella actually started as a television program. It was produced for television originally, and only subsequently then made into a theater piece. Our production is going to take place at the Palace. And so this is exciting for us, not only because our kids get to perform at the Palace, but because for us as an organization, this is the first time that during our summer season, we're using multiple venues. And so the last weekend in July, when Singing in the Rain has come down, and while the Pajama Game is being built in the park, there will be 2 public performances of the Cinderella, which will be presented entirely free of charge at the Palace.
At the Palace.
Which is wonderful, because this is the perfect show. If you have a kid who has never been to a play before, this is a completely cost-free way to get them into the theater. Yeah, it is. And for them, the exciting thing, first of all, our kids are really talented. So despite it being performed by young people, it's absolutely a solid piece of theater. It's a solid production. But I think kids getting to see their peers perform,
kids is
it's so helpful.
Perfect thing. So this is very exciting. I'm trying to figure out a way just to sum the whole thing up very quickly, but I'd like to repeat that our guest today has been Owen Smith, who is the managing director at the Palace Theater and the production and artistic director at Park Playhouse. These last few years out of a 27-year history, but moving fast in a direction that will bring theater into all our lives, I hope, if we just take advantage of these venues. Also, that he will have there are 3 shows at Park Playhouse: Singing in the Rain, opening in July 1st
through the 25th.
Pajama Game,
August 1st through the 22nd, and Cinderella, July 25 and 26, both days at 2 p.m. at the Palace. Parkplayhouse.com, all the information that folks need, all the information about getting reserved tickets. You can get reserved tickets to those 2 park-based productions, and all of the information about what to expect when you come for free.
And I will say to go to their website. That information and a little more information will all be at the end of this program, but the website address will also be there. You can call Park Playhouse at the Palace Theater and speak with Owen or someone there that can give you any more information that you may want about putting your children into one of these programs or involving yourself in attendance at any of these programs. And I've been waiting to say this because it really reminds me of how the arts survive. I mean, we mentioned Scotch Sour and knowing that Singing in the Rain needed to be connected with you folks at Park Playhouse, and Park Playhouse being connected with the Palace Theater, and Park Playhouse also working with EBA. Not only is that a perfect picture of what networking and partnerships need to be doing in this area to sustain and create art, but it's a wonderful little engine that could story about what you've done in your tenure. The Park Playhouse survived. It is the little engine that could. But you, through what you're doing now, is getting it not just up that hill, but over it and far beyond. And we're so very grateful that Park Playhouse is here for all of us to enjoy free.
Well, I appreciate that very much. It's a passion for me, and it's been a thrill to watch it not only survive but thrive amidst some challenges. And so thank you for making us part of your programming. It's appreciated.
Should we hope for a little bit of rain for Singing in the Rain,
well,
or should we hope that it's dry?
A lot of people have asked me, is it going to rain? Right. And I can tell you that our technical team, led by our designer Billy Davis and Andy Smith of Upstate Scenic, who are both Albany natives, have developed a really cool system. It will rain. They will have to clean it up every night, but it still can rain out. If there's a thunderstorm, we probably won't have a show that night.
But I will say none of us in the audience will get wet.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure.